What is up guys, name's Ray and welcome to another Genshin Impact video. Today we're talking about Rosaria and her different capabilities. But because she has so many different usage possibilities, it is impossible to put all the informations in one video. Otherwise it would be like a 1 hour plus long video. To compromise all the infos, I'm going to split the content and start off with the basic understanding of this character in a bit. And if you're interested in a specific build, I'm going over every build that I will mention in this video in detail in my following videos. So make sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on any future content. Now let's get right into it and start off with her usage possibilities. I think that Rosaria mainly can take 3 roles, which I will only talk about briefly today, but in detail in the specific videos where I want to cover much more aspects, making one video for each role. So we have physical DPS as role number 1, cryo DPS as the second role, or cryo sub DPS or support as the third role. Now before we go deeper into that, let's take a look at the character itself and watch the stats, the talents and constellations closely. Now she has a 240 base attack at maximum level 90, compared to the other Polyam users that lies between Jiangling and Zhongli, which is very solid. Her ascension stat is attack percentage, which potentially helps with increasing that stat and is also the reason why she can take different roles. Attack percentage is usually not the best ascension stat for endgame, but nevertheless it does increase all different damage sources including physical and elemental damage, making it also not being the worst. Her normal attack is a basic 5-hit combo with pretty high multipliers. The problem that I faced using her was that I felt that she attacks slower than the other Polyam users. For general usage, it should be good enough on every build, but especially on physical build, this is the most important talent. I'll go a bit more over it when I talk about this build. Now, generally spoken, Rosaria is not the type of character that lets you see one big number on the screen. It's rather 2 to 3 smaller numbers that adds up in damage. Her E, Ravaging Confession, has 2 multipliers straight off the bat. If we add up those 2 multipliers, it is pretty high, especially because it has a relatively low cooldown of only 6 seconds and generates 3 cryo particles always, which is equal to 27 energy per E. Her elemental burst, Rites of Termination, is also an ability that supports her versatility. After casting this ability, the whole damage can be applied off field, which means that you have the opportunity between using Rosaria herself in her elemental burst or another main DPS of your choice in its duration. This kinda comparable to a mix out of Chongyun's Q plus E, but way better. Important to notice is that her elemental burst doesn't infuse the element, but it applies cryo. Easier to say, you can use it easily for elemental reactions like superconduct, freeze or melt without overwriting any element that is used. Her passive talent Nightwalk is only useful in open world but not really necessary for combat or anything like that. While Regina Propitonium is very helpful. This one adds up to 12% crit rate for 5 seconds every time you use your E successfully. Important is that the buff only applies when you strike the enemy from behind, which isn't that easy against bigger monsters like the Ruin Guard. For that, you have to walk behind him and use the E, and then you still can trigger the buff. Shadow Samaritan, her last passive talent, is very easy to use. Casting her elemental burst buffs the crit rate of all party members by 15%, of Rosaria's crit rate for 10 seconds. This also can't be more than 50% crit rate. Important here is that it doesn't buff Rosaria herself, but it is a very useful and good support ability. Now talking about her constellations. Constellation 1, this one increases her attack speed and normal attack damage for 4 seconds, which should make up her slower normal attack animation. So more a quality of life change for the physical build. Her Constellation 2 increases the duration of her elemental burst by 4 seconds. That should be her biggest power spike in terms of raw damage. Constellation 3 adding 3 talent levels to her E. As for all characters, Constellation 4 is, in my personal opinion, the best constellation or most impactful one. You generate 5 energy, yes, energy, not particles, with each crit hit during her elemental burst. If you build her probably, you should crit most of the time. So basically you have her elemental burst off cooldown without adding in any energy recharge or a battery in form of a second cryo character. With other words, her Constellation 4 is a inbuilt Favonius lance or Favonius weapon. Constellation 5 adding 3 talent levels to her Q, and Constellation 5 using her E lets you shed 20% of the enemy's physical resistance for 10 seconds. Assuming that her E only has a cooldown of only 6 seconds means that you can maintain the debuff during the whole fight and actually give her the opportunity, besides being a physical carry, to be a physical support too. So talking about all that, you can see that she has different specialties that you can focus on. Let's come back to the 3 possible builds that I mentioned at the beginning, starting with the first one. Physical DPS. This build obviously focuses on her auto attacks and also on the elemental reaction superconduct. The screen time overall here is pretty high for Rosaria. The only weapon choices here would be Crescent Pike or Dragon Spine Spear, since they are both superior for this build. I will make a detailed comparison video about those 2 weapons very soon, but the TLDR is basically that Crescent Pike is better if you want to focus on auto attacking more, and Dragon Spine Spear is better if you rotate through your characters due to the cooldown of its passive. A noticeable side effect is that in the raw auto attack combo, Rosaria would lose against Xiangling when they both use Crescent Pike, because she has a double hit on the 3rd hit and a 4 split hit on the 4th hit, which scales off with Crescent Pike's passive, while Rosaria only has 1 double hit on the 5th hit. But comparing to the whole combo, Rosaria wins because she can make use of superconduct and also has less issues with cooldowns and energy on her abilities. For artifacts, I would recommend 2-piece Gladiator and 2-piece Bloodstained, or a 4-piece Gladiators if you can obtain it. For team comps, you basically just need 1 Electro character, and then you can add in 2 units of your choice. For example, Kyre as a sub DPS for Cryo Resonance and Bennett as a damage buffing healer. Best in slot for the Electro slot should be Fischl. Alternatives are Beidou or Lisa. Now the next role is Cryo DPS. This build is focusing around her E and her Q, and depending on your playstyle also partly on the auto attacks during your rotations. Especially on Constellation 4, this is important. We have a lot of different weapon choices here, but just to make it quick, I'll put you a TLDR picture on the screen ranking those that are, in my personal opinion, the best weapons. If you want to see some more reasonings behind the rankings, definitely make sure to watch my Cryo DPS weapon comparison video coming very soon. Now for 5-star weapons, I would say that Staff of Homa is her best in slot weapon, followed by Skyward Spine or Primordial Jade. Primordial Jade let you overcap in crit real quick, while Skyward Spine has a very nice passive. It has energy recharge, which does really help with Rosaria because you can maintain her elemental burst. But yeah, depending on your build, I would say that they are like equal. Vortex Vanquisher as the last best weapon for the 5-star slots, but I wouldn't recommend Vortex Vanquisher over the 4-star weapons that I did mention. So generally spoken, without mentioning the 4-star weapons that you can see, Staff of Homa number 1, Skyward Spine number 2 if you have enough energy recharge, or if you have Constellation 4, I think I would pick this over the Primordial Jade. Then Black Cliff because it has the high crit damage. Favonius Lance, it is basically budget Skyward Spine, if we can say so, as well as Deathmatch is the budget Jade Spear. And Vortex, the big downside on Vortex is that it forces you to auto attack at least 5 times, and you have to maintain a shield to use its full potential. Now for artifact sets, there are a lot of possibilities depending on your subsets, but if you can, I would go for either a 2-piece Gladiators and 2-piece Blizzard Strayer, or a 2-piece Noblesse and 2-piece Blizzard Strayer, followed by 4-piece Blizzard Strayer if you miss out on crit rate. For team comps, it depends on if you like to focus on a reverse melt or a freeze comp. I think these are like the two strongest possibilities. For melt, Zhangling and Bennett are basically the only choices, and for freeze, Xingqiu and Kair or Zhangyan are the choices. Rest is to fill up with a healer. Now let's go over to the last build, the Cryo Support DPS, or sub DPS. This build is focusing especially on the almost 100% uptime of the Elemental Burst. The difference here is that you would use Rosaria's Elemental Burst, maybe chain her Elemental skill, wait for the particles to return, and then swap her out for your main DPS. Or you use your Elemental skill to obtain enough energy, you use the Elemental Burst, and immediately swap out after Q is casted. And weapon choices, they are exactly the same like for Cryo DPS, but I would focus more on energy recharge rather than damage to make sure that you have a good uptime on the Elemental Burst. Now, generally speaking, we can say again, Steel Staff of Homar is the best weapon, but in builds of Artifact, I would definitely recommend to focus on energy recharge. If you cannot obtain enough energy recharge, or if you feel like that your Elemental Burst doesn't have enough uptime, go for Skyward Spine, followed by Primordial Jade, just because it is the 5-star weapon, it has superior stats, followed by Favonius Lance, which I would pick over the Blackcliff Pole, but with a ER's timepiece, you can run it instead of the Favonius Lance, because you get the crit damage. So I would look at your subsets of your artifacts. Then I would add in Deathmatch, and Vortex is even more unpractical as a sub DPS. For artifact builds, it is pretty straightforward. I would prioritize 2-piece Blizzard Strayer, 2-piece Noblesse, and alternatives to that, if you cannot obtain this set with good subsets, 2-piece Gladiators, 2-piece Noblesse as the second best for Cryo Support, 4-piece Noblesse, or even 4-piece Blizzard Strayer are also an option. Now, after testing all those builds for hours and hours, comparing her to her different opposites, and playing around with those builds, I would solidly rank those the following out of 10. Notice that I only used a C0 Rosaria, and my opinion on that could change with getting higher constellations in the future. But as of right now, this is what I'm thinking. For the physical DPS build, I would give her a 7 out of 10. It is very good, but I would say that Xinyan with constellations or Zhongli with constellations potentially are stronger than Rosaria, but I didn't test her C6, of course, so it could go 1 point higher, but I'm pretty sure that it won't go higher than 8 out of 10. Cryo DPS could change if I get her constellation too, but as of right now, I would give her a 8 out of 10. It is very good, but she still has some issues, especially because that the duration is only 8 seconds. It feels a bit short, could be a little bit longer, so I think that those 4 seconds on Constellations 2 would add up. As a Cryo Support, I think that at Constellation 0, she's already very good. I think this is the best build if you want to go for a low Constellation Rosaria, 8.5 out of 10. Now with that being said, I want to end the video for the basic understanding guide for Rosaria. I hope you guys enjoyed and you are looking forward to the more in-depth videos referring to Rosaria. Like, comment and subscribe, it would help me out a lot, and I see you guys next time.